Yo, this is Evan. I sign as Digilogix, and this is another audio tutorial for my audio journal. So I made a post last week, 2 weeks ago, about my phase modulated Formant oscillators, and this is a follow-up on that. So I wanted to share some additional thoughts, some practical concerns, and at the end I'm going to walk through assembling 5 of probably my favorite snapshots and give a little bit of insight on why they may be good. Anyways, so probably the most challenging aspect of this project is the complex relationship between the phase modulation controls and the resultant tone. It is difficult to make a product that sounds polished and interesting. I'm sorry, as polished and interesting as the 3 snapshots. I showed them in the last video. I will walk through how to assemble them. The project responds predictably for the first 70%, but the last 30%, I can't really identify a pattern. There's a pretty big elephant in the room. When I wired up the original, I did it, how do you say, wrong. I did it wrong. I connected an addition instead of a multiplication, and apparently that is part of the reason some of the juice is right there. So I have preserved that and actually expanded on it and gone into experimenting with why it may help. Anyways, those are already completed features. I just added this right here. This knob lets you to modulate modulator A from modulator B. I've already had the option to modulate modulator A from C and B from C. Now I can have C modulate B, modulate A, and all 3 of these can simultaneously modulate in parallel. So I'm just adding to the potential sound possibilities. Um, so I wired up the original wrong. Yes. So modulator C is... Oh, this script is actually now out of date. I was going to say that modulator C is different than A and B, but no, at this point, they're actually... all 3 of them are identical except for these 3 controls on the side. I may add the ability to route B to C, because then that would allow for some phase distortion, which would be sick. So, yes, these 3 are identical, but I tend to use modulator C to serve the same role in just about all of the snapshots that I've made, which means theoretically, and when I say I've parameterized it the same, I mean the frequency coefficient and the TX selection, which is, 0.5 is an octave below your fundamental, 1 would be your fundamental, 2 would be an octave up from your fundamental. That literally is a coefficient for the frequency going to each of those operators. So anyway, I'm referring to these 2 I've left pretty much unchanged since I started messing with this project. It should be a completely different animal if I was to change those. But I tend to follow a consistent pattern when parameterizing this thing. It starts off with crossfading all the way to the Formant oscillators. Let me just initialize these guys. Fading X all the way, setting M somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. So usually like 20 is in the extremes, but I've been getting some good results around like 10. And M values below 8 are also completely unique from all the other selections. But anyways, crossfade, set M. I then usually apply some modulation from modulator C. That will give you this. So I'm kind of formulating up some tentative theory here. The modulation is going to be most intense when you're not the modulation. The spectrum is going to be most intense when you're crossfaded all the way to the Formant Oscillator. That is because that has more spectral content than setting crossfade to 0, because obviously that's just a sinusoid or a cosinusoid in the 2 cosine version. So, duh, this is going to be brighter than this. That's pretty obvious. So in the little sequence that I do, I apply some modulation to it, and then I'm going to walk back the crossfade parameter. It usually ends up being around 0.3, but it will make sense as soon as you hear the balance of the low end to the high end. Okay, we're already like 40% of the way there. At this point, I usually tend to apply modulation from A or B, and I feel like modulate to the M destination first, then to the global, but okay, yeah, that's starting to sound like it's 60% of the way there to a satisfying, polished sound. So once I get that set up, once I get like modulator B set, I will then jump back to the crossfader, see if I need to walk it back any further. In that case, I turned it up a little bit. And once I get those set, I will see if I can put a little frosting on top of it. By that, I will change the M parameter or change the amount of phase modulation going to the M destination. So that would sound like this. Ooh, that's juicy right there. I'm saving that to come back to. Anyways, so the M parameter, which sets the resonant peak along the spectrum, if you were to watch the spectrum, you would see as I pull M back, the spectrum will sort of compress towards the low end, which makes sense because when I remove all the phase modulation, route all the way to the Formant Oscillator, this is what the M parameter does. You can see the Formant peak right here. This is the fundamental. You can tell by my little identification line. So when routing phase modulation to the M destination, it's literally getting like added to or right after a multiplication and a phase wrapping step internally. Anyways, yes, these M parameters are referring to the same M which I used in my nomenclature when making this original design. Anyways, where was I? Sometimes pushing M up towards 20, I probably wouldn't want to go higher than 25 because you will see it'll start aliasing. If not already at 20, it will definitely be by like 25 or 30. So I should probably reduce the range from M from 0 to 63 to like 0 to 31 or something. So I'm noticing when I look at this, as I increase M, I'm seeing modulated spectra moving outwards in both directions from the formant peak. I'll show you what I mean by that. So we're looking at this guy right here, and as I start to send modulation, you can see it starts to expand in both directions. Perhaps this one would be a better example. Oh, this is a great visualization opportunity. So I said that the M destination only is applicable to the crossfade 1 position of the crossfade knob. When crossfade is set to 0, M has no effect. And I mentioned very quickly, but probably didn't remember to come back to, the fundamental routing destinations that you see right here, that's sending to the opposite of the M parameter. So that means that the phase modulation is routing to the 0 position. This is the cosine, I'm sorry, not cosine, sine. So essentially bypassing the formant block and just connecting it directly to a sinusoid. This will give you the darkest, least aliasing results. And when interpreting these voices, this is actually really, really useful. Anyways, getting off topic again. The fundamental destination lets you send modulation to the sinusoid position of the crossfade knob. So let me bring the, here's that formant peak. So if M is going to send modulation to the formant, the fundamental will send modulation to the sinusoid, meaning this does nothing, because all of that modulation is going to the 0 position. And just as a little refresher, the global destination sends to a higher level and just modulates everything. So global will always have an effect, as global modulation includes the 0 position and the 1 position and everything else. So to get the same effect as, let's say we wanted to send 0.5 to global, to get the same effect, you could do 0.5 to the M and 0.5 to the fundamental and get the exact same thing. But I figured that just the one knob would change things up, make it quicker to parameterize, and I've found that I use the dedicated global knob in a completely different manner than I would use either the M or the fundamental knobs. It kind of, it definitely changed the way I was looking at routing the phase modulation. Now I kind of look at adding high end to these guys as sending modulation to the global and then adjusting up or down both the fundamental and the M destinations. So the global phase modulation gives the base that I build the high end on top of. It's definitely the foundation of the sound. Anyways, I was mentioning about interpreting these, and let's interpret one of these real quick. Damn, that sounds so cool. One of the first thing that I do is I observe the crossfade at 0 sound. This kind of gives context that I can make relative observations of the phase modulation from. If that is a sinusoid, then we know that, I guess this was a bad example because I have two fundamental routings here. So let's take a different example here. Okay, so we're going to set that to 0, and this is the basis of this sound, which makes sense because this is the final sound. Here is the basis of that. Not too hard to see how you get the final sound from the original, but once I understand the global amount of phase modulation, it lets me characterize what I'm doing to the high end a lot more effectively. That's pretty, like, you can definitely see a relationship there. If I have any phase modulation sending to the fundamental destination, though, that makes this observation method less effective, but still very relevant because I tend to leave that crossfade knob around 0.3. So understanding the base amount of phase modulation will let you characterize what you want to do to the top end of it a lot better. Sorry, I dropped my script here. By the way, I hope you can't hear. I have the AC unit on right now. You can hear it when the noise gate takes a second to mute my microphone. Anyways, I said I would walk through some of these snapshots, so let's do that really fast. Oh my gosh, this one is so frickin' frustratingly simple. Watch this. This is so crazy. So let's follow the method that I described. I said set crossfade to 1, apply the M, we'll just leave that, and then I would apply some usually global modulation from C and then walk this back. So that gives us, before walking it back, let's pull it back. And then I said I go to modulator A or B and then apply some additional modulation. Because I know where I want it to end up, let's start with the M. And that takes us to our final sound right there. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just kidding. Let's see, what's the next one on here? Oops, I just unplugged my monitor. It's back now. Next one. All right, this one's also pretty simple, but it's not 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5. My gosh. Oh yeah, and I mentioned I always tend to have this guy doing the same thing. You'll see these two parameters are probably not going to change in any of these. Yeah, none of them. Yeah, I'm doing this thing with modulator C. I hope my microphone doesn't drop out when I'm loading snapshots like that. It momentarily mutes my audio, so I hope... Oh, I'm sure that you're probably not hearing when I load a snapshot. Okay, what's the next one? Alright, I've got my little paper. Let's initialize everything. Oh, good. So Normally I'm using the Formant one or the triangular window Formant oscillator. This one is using a half sine cubed window function, and yes, the the part that lets me increase the frequency of the formant, if you watch on this, you'll see that the waveform will it will move from the left to the right as I increase M. You'll see more cycles coming in, but phase 0 remains stationary. This one, phase 0 or phase 0.5 remains stationary. So I have another example where the opposite is true, where I have the phase 0 stationary, and this one gives quite a different character. Anyways, let's see here. What do I need to parameterize? So we have it here. Let's set M somewhere around there. I guess the snapshot says to set it to 21. I had 12. Let's just go with 12. I am following a list of things to do here, so it'll take me a second to unwrap these instructions in them and apply them in the correct sequence. So C is going to have okay, this one's quite extreme. 2.249 or 299 something. I always enjoy this step because hearing that beautiful phase modulation and then bringing back in the fundamental is just really satisfying to me. Okay, what is next? Got those two set. Fundamental on modulator A. I think that pretty much takes us to where we're supposed to be. Well, it's damn close. Let's see how close I got. Oh, I wasn't even close at all. Man, I love that one. That's probably my favorite of the snapshots. Okay, this guy is also really extreme. If I was to follow the parameterization sequence, it actually wouldn't really take me there, so I'm going to break the sequence, and I'll just give some insight at this point how the phase modulation parameters are going to change the resultant sound. So as you can see, this one I have M more than 1, more than 2. I have it at 2.299. This is going to give phase wrapping, so let's just hear what effects it has. This may be able to do my explanation for me. Okay, yeah. So watch as I increase this amount of modulation, you'll see you see how this just started changing right here, and you can hear the moment it right there, it just started. It's gonna happen again. There. So that was around like 0.4. My guess is that at 2.4, those bands are going to come in. No. 1.6. 2.56, 3.4. Okay. I'm looking for patterns. So you see that oscillating relationship between the modulation amount and the resultant sound. It had these noticeable steps, and that has to do with the window function and reasons, but that leads me to a point that I completely forgot to mention here. Um, the weighting of these knobs changes based on the other knobs. So let's say this knob had a certain effect, and when nothing else is active, and let's say I activate this, then this one may do very little, or it may do a whole lot. And when you have multiple phase modulations happening, any one of these parameters, which would have otherwise been continuous and predictable, can become very hard to predict what the resultant tone is going to be, and it can have sections where a little tiny bit of the knob makes a huge change on the sound, and then the next half of the knob does almost nothing, and out of nowhere it may become super sensitive again, and that makes that non pattern forming or non abiding to a pattern behavior makes it kind of hard to connect one snapshot or one parameterization to another. I would like to be able to smoothly parameterize from one snapshot to the next, but that's not something I've found very achievable, but I haven't necessarily been looking too hard for it. Anyways, I'm just pretty much talking to myself at this point, so I will wrap this video up. If you are interested in this project, I do plan on uploading it to the Reactor user library. If you are interested in it, please state so in the comments, and I will hurry my ass up on posting it. I'm just kind of, from obsessive compulsive, wanting to make this upload perfect, so I'm giving info in the core cell so someone who doesn't know what they're looking at can read an explanation of what's going on. And I'm going to also be doing more tutorial videos, but this project is still definitely in the construction phase, the experimentation. It is still gaining new features, that one specifically, and we will see where it's going to be going next time. But once again, thanks for listening. This was Evan. I gave a little insight on the practical performance concerns of the Formant Oscillator. I walked through my process through parameterizing and my process for interpreting pre-parameterized snapshots, and I also went over what these three knobs do. They allow for modulator to modulator modulation. Effectively, normally these three would apply modulation in parallel, but when you have one of these active, you are modulating one of the, I need to stop saying that word. You're modulating one of the modulators in series, while the three simultaneously can operate in parallel. So that means interesting things. It means there may be gems of sound that I will take years to figure out. Anyways, with this new parameter, that will allow me to have this, modulate this, modulate this. And those three operators in series, I have found to produce really colorful and interesting results. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.